Conference, it's an enormous privilege to be the Secretary of State for Defence, representing our armed forces, the best in the world. Daily, our armed forces are doing a difficult job, taking great risk on our behalf, facing violent and prolonged fight in Afghanistan. Daily, there are reports of acts of bravery carried out in the line of duty by professional soldiers doing their job. This year, 81 soldiers have paid the ultimate sacrifice, laying down their lives for their country. 52 since I became Defence Secretary in June. 71 have sustained life-changing injuries over the same period. In my experience, they don't want plaudits for what they do. They do, however, deserve our thanks. They expect and they absolutely deserve our full support. Conference, the public rightly asks questions. Why are we there? How long will we be there? How long will we need to stay? Are our troops properly equipped? Can we afford to be fighting there? Can we win? My job as Defence Secretary is to answer those questions, to ensure that when our country's resolve is tested, we hold firm. And to ensure that the stability of the whole region and the credibility of the NATO alliance is not put at risk by our walking away. Conference, in my view, we can't afford not to be there. It's 8 years now since al-Qaeda terrorists, sheltered by the Taliban rule in Afghanistan, brought down the Twin Towers using planes as bombs. Terrorist strike of unprecedented scale. Not only was a NATO ally attacked, invoking Article 5 of the treaty that views an attack on one member as an attack on all, but 67 British citizens were among the casualties from over 90 countries. The war in Afghanistan is our war, alongside the 41 other countries providing troops to the coalition. We are there as a result of a sober assessment of the terrorist threat facing Britain. We're there to prevent the Taliban returning and again giving al-Qaeda free rein. We're there to ensure our national security. Now, I understand that it's sometimes difficult for people to see this faraway country as a direct threat to them. But the distant threat can become a local atrocity. 3/4 of the most serious terrorist plots against the UK have germinated in the mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, including the airline plot where terrorists have recently been convicted. For Britain to be secure, Afghanistan needs to be secure. Pakistan needs to be secure. The threat may be less visible, but it is no less real. The risks of leaving Afghanistan before the job is finished are stark. We would have lost our resolve in the face of adversity, with profound consequences for our international reputation. The terrorists would be characterised as the winners. We would be the losers. Pakistan is currently engaged against the Taliban and al-Qaeda, lodged in the mountain borders of their country. Success will be when the Afghan government is strong enough to be able to do this themselves. Now, we can't put a time limit on that, but we're making progress, and we need to see significantly more progress in the next year or so. As the Coalition Commander, General McChrystal, has said, the situation is serious. we have some difficult decisions to take in the coming months, including whether or not more troops are needed in the short term. Now, we'll take those decisions as an alliance, although the UK can't allow the deployment of its troops to outstrip the supply of equipment which allows them to do their job and minimises the risks that they face. Before I agree to any increase in troop numbers, I must be sure that the balance of risk is acceptable by evaluating the capacity of the supply chain to properly equip the increased force. As our Prime Minister Gordon Brown has said, we will move to partnering the Afghan National Army, giving it the skills and the strength to hold the ground that the coalition clears. We support a more ambitious target of training 4,000 Afghan Army soldiers per month, an increase from the rate of 2,000, so that the Afghan Army reaches its target strength by November of next year, ahead of the current target. Now, the recent elections were not everything that we'd hoped. Not enough people voted, and there were reports of ballot rigging. But the fact that they took place at all, despite the Taliban determination to stop them, is an achievement. And when it emerges, the new government must have a mandate to work on the issues that are important to the Afghan people, including increasing and building up the size and the strength of the Afghan army. Over time, as the Afghans take increasing responsibility for their own security and our military presence is less required, then political reconciliation and development will increasingly come to the fore. Efforts led by David Miliband and Douglas Alexander, which are essential to rebuild Afghanistan in the long term. Conference, as a nation, we're fiercely proud of our armed forces. But having the best armed forces in the world doesn't come without a human cost. We need to understand that conflict is dangerous and it's bloody. Our armed forces know that they can't defeat an enemy without risking death and injury. But if we ask our armed forces to take risk on our behalf, then we have a responsibility to look after them, to deliver the best medical care when they're injured, to support their loved ones waiting at home. Last year, we doubled the upfront lump sum compensation payment for the most seriously injured. However, I want all of our forces to be confident that we're offering them a fair compensation package. And that's why over the summer, I announced a review into the compensation scheme, independently chaired by Admiral Boyce. Over the course of last year, the ministerial team in the MOD have been working with the other government departments to implement our improvement plan for the welfare of our personnel, making sure that being a member of the armed forces doesn't disadvantage you when you're accessing healthcare or education or housing. And conference, if we ask our armed forces to fight on our behalf, then as a government we have to equip them properly. Now, our commanders have almost double the helicopter capacity of 3 years ago, but of course we can and we must do more. And that's why later this year the Merlin fleet, recently in Iraq, will go out to the Afghan theatre. We've spent over £1 billion on more than 1,000 new vehicles since entering Helmand in 2006. That includes 280 Mastiff, which offer world-leading protection against mines and roadside bombs. I've travelled in a Mastiff at a forward operating base in Musa Qala, and I can tell you that you don't get a better protected vehicle. We're in a counterinsurgency operation. where you need to win the hearts and minds of people. You have to get out of the mastiff. And the tactics of our enemy are constantly evolve. The biggest threat to our forces in Afghanistan now is the threat of the improvised explosive device, waiting for a vehicle to drive over or a foot patrol to detonate. Now, I'm determined to do everything that we can to ensure that our equipment evolves too, that it keeps pace with the developing threat in order to get one step ahead of the enemy. Now, it's right that the government is subject to scrutiny, and I believe that the national security has to come ahead of party politics. And if there are ways that we can do better, no one wants to know them more than I. But those who suggest that the government's failing in its duty because it has helicopters in Hampshire rather than Helmand misunderstand that having a sustainable force in theatre requires a training fleet back here at home, that battle replacements and helicopters being repaired are stationed here at home. Now, a minority of critics have simply ignored the facts in an attempt to discredit the Labour government. Liam Fox claimed that Ridgeback armoured vehicles were stranded in Dubai for lack of airlift to take them to theatre. He accused the government of betraying our troops without even bothering to check the facts. In reality, those vehicles were ahead of schedule. Liam, false claims don't just damage the government, they risk damaging the morale of our forces They risk damaging the morale of our forces, the public and the mission. So conference over the next few months to the general election, we have to have determination and resolve. We must continue to put the national interest first and stay the course in Afghanistan. We must expose the shallow opportunism of the Tories, and we must fight to win.